In this video, we're going to talk about variables, and I'm going to show you the 4 most commonly used variables, and we're going to briefly create some and display them to the console. To understand how a variable works, you can think of it like a box or a rubber bin that you have to store objects. So each box that you have can only store a certain type of object. So you could have a box for storing Lego, a box for storing books, and so on, but you can't mix and match or take the books out of one box and then put Lego in it. They have to stay the same. So to demonstrate this, let's jump right in and start creating some variables. So let's open our first script, which we still have in our project here. And we still have this debug message. We can leave that for now, that's fine. Now to create variables, what you have to do is what's called declaring a variable. And all that means is creating the variable. So where we do this is right above start here after this open curly brace at the very start of our script. So I'm just going to press enter a few times. And now on this line, I can create a variable. So the way we create them is we first type out the type of variable we want to create. And you're going to learn a lot of common ones that are used, but right now we're going to cover the 4 basics. The first one is called an integer, and its abbreviation is just int, int. So we put the type, and then we need to give it a name. So this can literally be almost anything. You can't use any special characters or anything like that, but you can word it whatever you want. But a common practice is the first word of your name will be a lowercase letter, and then any words after that will be uppercase. So say if you just made an integer called age, you would usually make it all lowercase. But if you did something like say my age, then you would put lowercase on my and a capital age for age. Okay, and now to finish declaring this variable, just like our debug message, we have to put a semicolon. So now that I put that semicolon, the red squiggle went away, and we have a variable called my age. And it's of type integer, but we haven't actually put anything in this variable yet. So now we can do this a couple different ways. So when you create your integer, it's going to create an integer or a box called my age, but there's nothing in that box yet. If we want to put something in there right when we create it, we can put an equal sign and then we can give it any number we want. So an integer is just a whole number, no decimals, nothing like that. So we could say 50. So now we have a variable called my age of type integer, and it has the value 50 in it. So let's make sure this is actually working. I'm going to take this debug message out of update. I'm going to delete that. And now in start, let's do another debug.log. And let's just put my age. And notice the autocomplete picks it up now. So we can just press enter on that. And then we just got to put a semicolon at the end. So not only can you type a string in here with double quotes, and then whatever string you want to put, you can output variables. And this is where it starts getting very handy. Because if we're troubleshooting our game and we don't know how much health the player has, we can output it in a debug message and then look at it. So let's go back to Unity. Let's test this out. Now I run the game, and in the console we get 50. But notice it only shows 50, not the variable name. So if we had a whole bunch of variables that we're outputting to the console, and we don't have any context of what these numbers are, they're not going to be any help to us. So let's stop this and let's go back into our script. And what we can actually do is we can output more than one thing in debug.log. So like we did the first time, let's put a set of double quotes here and let's output something. Let's put a string. And we're just going to call it age. I'll put a colon here, maybe a space. And now we're getting a red squiggle because Visual Studio doesn't know what to do with this. What we have to do is put a plus in between. So now this is basically going to say print out the string age and my age. So it's not going to actually do any math with the plus because there's no way it can add a couple of characters to a number. And Visual Studio is smart enough to know that it can't do that. So it changes my age to display as a number. We're going to talk a lot more about technical stuff like that as we progress, but I don't want to overwhelm you with that right at the start. So now let's go and run our game again. And this time we know that it's age that is number 50. So that's where you start getting a lot more useful information. Now the next variable I'm going to talk about is called a float, or a floating point number. And this is where you get your decimal numbers. So I'm just going to make this one, I'm going to call it my money. And then let's assign something into it right now. And one thing to note here is we're using an equal sign. And normally you would think of that being my money equals something. That's not the way we want to think about it when we're programming. What this actually does is it's an assignment operator. So what it's saying is, in the case of our my age, it's not saying my age actually equals 50. What it's saying is take the value 50 and assign that into my age. That's just something I want to mention right now. If you don't fully understand that yet, that's fine. We're going to get more into that as well. But it is something that confuses a lot of beginners because they think this is going to say my age equals 50. And until you get used to programming, that's normal. That's how you would think it works. But it's better to think of it as assign 50 into what's on the left of it. So my age. Okay, so back to our float of my money. Let's make this equal, I'm going to say $20.25. And then we got to add our semicolon. But notice, even though we put a semicolon, it's giving us a red squiggle line. And it's giving a message here that it can't convert the type. What this actually means is C# has more than one type of value that can use a decimal number. So in this case, C# doesn't know what this value should be. It doesn't know if it's a floating number or if it's other types. So what we got to do is tell it that by putting an F at the end. And now that goes away. So anytime you assign something into a float variable, you want to put F at the end. So we have a variable of our money now. So let's output this as well. And just to make it quicker, we can highlight this, hit Control-C to copy, and then Control-V to paste. And then let's change age to money. And then my age will change to my money. Okay, and now if we go to Unity and run it, now we're going to see both of them output. Okay, so we got our age and we got our money. All right, so that's two of the common variables. The next one we've sort of worked with already here is a string. So we put it as string, and I'm going to put this as my name. Now what I want to assign into here is just going to be my name. So again, anything that's a string, we need to put in double quotes like this. So if we tried without that, Visual Studio doesn't know what Mike means. It could be a variable, it could be some secret function. We have to tell it with the double quotes. Okay, and then we can output that one again. So let's copy that, make another line. Call this name. Okay, and I'll put my name. Let's just go confirm that works. All right, so we got our name. And now the last one I'm going to show you is a different one you wouldn't normally think of. So this is called a boolean, and it's abbreviated as bool. Now what this does is this only holds two values, either true or false. So for something like this, a lot of the time when you make variables like this, if it's a boolean, a lot of people put either the word has or is in front of it. So for example, say if we made a boolean of is driving. So it makes it more clear when you're thinking about the variable name, instead of just driving, which you don't really know what it is driving could mean, is the player driving, yes or no. So it's just a bit more clear. And then has is another one. So something like, say, has key. Does he have the key? Yes or no. So none of these names are forced. This is just common practice that a lot of people do. You could literally name these anything you want. It could just be a bunch of random letters. I do want to stress right from the start, Naming your variables, something that really makes sense to you that you're not going to forget later, helps a lot. It can be a huge pain to troubleshoot a game when you come back to something a few months later and your variables are just random words that don't make any sense. And then you have to spend the time going back to figure out what they all do. So the more clear you can be, the better. Okay, so is driving, let's just set this to false. Okay, and then the exact same thing, we can output this in a debug. So I'm just going to put is driving, and we'll put a question mark. Or actually, no, we won't put a question mark. We'll just put this. Okay, and then we put is driving. So same thing as all the others. Let's go run our game. Okay, and there we have it. Is driving is false. Okay, so these are the 4 main types of variables, but there are countless other types that we can use, and we're going to use a lot of them as we progress through the course. But these are the 4 that you really need to know as the core foundations.